So the project for today is to install some new reading lights, and I got these ones on Amazon and they're pretty inexpensive, but I like the kind of retro look to replace the existing ones. We have what I think is probably an original light here, and you can see pretty similar look. It's a little different color, but I don't think that'll cause any problems. This one has a little different switch, but these were falling out, and the switches, and this one works. The other side's missing altogether. So thought this would be a nice upgrade to get a couple of new reading lights that are attached and tight and have LED light bulbs. So that's the project for today, and I'm going to start out by removing this old one. And I can see that up in the top here there's a little cover, and so I'll need to remove the cover and then look at wiring in the new light. Alright, so I've got into the top here, and there are a couple of covers. There's a cover that covers the wires coming down, and then there's this cover on the bottom that covers up the wires on the back of the light switch. And so it's kind of nice to have the covers. I would assume after 44 years that those things would be missing, but it's nice to have those. When I got into it, I found that there's a kind of a nice connector here going from the original wiring to apparently the original light. And so rather than just cutting the wires coming down and attaching my new wiring, I think I'd like to keep this connector. And so what I'll do is, from this broken light that's falling apart here, I'll cut off the wires after the connector and wire those into the new light so that I'll still have this nice connector. There's plenty of room under this cover for a little extra wiring, and so I think that'll be just fine. And I found in the parts that I got from the previous owner that there is another one of these lights. It has the connector. The switch is completely seized up and corroded and things, and actually there's quite a bit of corrosion on the connector, and so I'll clean up the connectors a little bit, and I'll put a little bit of dielectric grease on these. Anytime I'm doing wiring, I'm trying to clean up the connections and put some dielectric grease on there to prevent future corrosion. So those are going to be the next steps, is to cut off the connectors, wire those into the new lights so that I can wire it up and test it. Okay, so I have connected the connectors, so the original connectors, to my other wires, and use a little shrink wrap here to seal that. Also cleaned up the connections so that I can get a good connection. I'll put a little bit of dielectric grease on this when I'm ready to put it together as the final install. The way this will go is it'll feed up through the bottom, and I will screw this in. But first I want to just check to make sure that the light's going to work. So let me plug this in, and yeah, it works. We've got a light. That looks like it'll be good. So I'm going to check the other one real quick, make sure that it also works. So did the same thing here, wired in the existing connector, and this is the one that wasn't installed when we started the project, and so there may be some other problems here, but let's just check it. Okay, so that one doesn't work. I'm going to need to check the electrical here and see what's happening. There's looks like some previous wiring here that has happened. I'll bring my light over. So there's something going on here with a zip tie, a couple of wires going into this, so there's some kind of pigtail that's happened here. So I'll need to do a little troubleshooting to figure out why this light isn't working when I plugged it in. It's probably why it wasn't installed, because there was some other electrical problem to deal with. So I'll do a little investigation and see what I find. Alright, so I got out the multimeter and tested the connections here, and it turns out I just hadn't cleaned these connections yet. I am getting power and ground to this, and so I took a little bit of emery paper, so a little bit of my actually emery cloth, and cleaned up the connections on this, and put it together, and I think now it should make good contact. Let's see. Yep. All right, this light is working now. So next step, now that I've got wiring set up and everything working, is to actually do the install. Okay, so here we are with install, and I ended up needing to use a router and open up this side a little bit because of the connections for the new light were hitting this inner lining to the cabinet. And so I just used I tried to use a router, but there wasn't enough space, so I ended up using a Dremel to open that up a little bit. It was just a couple of inches, but we've got this plugged in. We need to route the wires back to the back, put the covers back on. I've put a little bit of dielectric grease on the connections, so help keep those in good shape. And so if we come underneath here, we can see the new light, and we turn that on. Works great, and now it's tight. We can direct the light where we want, and that's looking pretty good. Now over on the other side, so if we come over here, this side I found a few things, and it's pretty typical with working on this motorhome just because of the age. There were several screws missing inside there, and so needed to replace those. And then when I tried to mount the light on the bottom, both of the screw holes were stripped out. Would not take any kind of grip at all on the screws. And so I'm using some wood glue and some pieces of wood to basically fill in those holes so that I can kind of retap them and put in the screws to hold the light. So I need to wait for that wood glue to dry, but I did the same thing in here, opening that hole up a little bit so that there would be enough space for the wires of the light. All right, so I've got this all done. I've got the covers back on. I've replaced most of the missing screws that I can, and the light is now working. And over on the other side, I had to do those wood repairs on the screws that hold the light in, but that turned out great. So the wood glue and a little extra wood in those holes, and the screws tightened down nicely, and I think that will hold well. And got the covers back installed here also. So I think we're all done with this project.